Wow. You look more from here to there. Okay, I've got to tell you three things to make my reading make sense. First of all, I just finished grad school, so I'm reading my thesis to you. And my thinking is if I had to write it, you have to hear it. Um, the second thing is clearly I went to grad school a little later than most people, and I can tell you that everything I did there, probably up until this point, was about one thing, which is what the hell does a middle-aged gay guy meant to look like? I mean, am I meant to be a stay-at-home dad, or am I meant to still be hooking up? Am I meant to be at the bathhouse shopping? I don't know. So, like for 3 years, I've been making art. It was a MFA and studio art about what I'm meant to look like. And the third thing is, who knows what a thesis is? Like if you're in philosophy or anthropology or biology, that maybe they know, but in the art department they have no idea. One person said, draw a flower. Another person said, you need to put your annotated footnotes in a second page and a chapter behind. I mean, I don't know, these acid paper, 1,000 words, margins, it was chaos. I had no idea what to do. And I was about to draw a flower when when there came this shot of advice from my very lesbian chair of my committee, who she just said, sort of, put your big girl shoes on. And she said something to me that was like this crystal bell in winter. And she just said, why don't you just write something that's useful to you? So I thought, okay, yeah, I can see why you're the chair. So then I wrote, AIDS is a brace. And that convoluted set of contradictory definitions about what a thesis should look like isn't irrelevant. The university is an institution, a large, unwieldy, worthy, mercurial network of procedures and overdetermined purpose, built in layers and driven by intelligent, exhausted, earnest, ambitious, fickle, altruistic people hoping to help. I found it familiar. ACT UP was founded in March 1987 by playwright and AIDS activist Larry Kramer. In a speech at the Lesbian and Gay Community Services Center of New York, Kramer challenged the gay and lesbian movement to organize, mobilize, and demand an effective AIDS policy response. He informed the audience of gay men that 2/3 of them might be dead within 5 years. Kramer's call to arms was successful. The AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, or ACT UP, gave many people additional years of life, but the life that is reading these words right now has been hobbled just as fully as it was freed. Over the course of the past 3 years, scales fell from my eyes. They were positively scraped off the corneas of academia as the quarters of academia inch by. What was revealed to that part of me who calls himself artist was an uncomfortable truth, which is this: the era that impressed itself so completely upon myself established a set of prescriptive exercises that I've slavishly obeyed ever since. Therefore, over time, I've engorged a set of muscles at the expense of other muscles that have remained lame, useless, not there at all. So for a couple of decades, I've looked with a squint. There's been a list in my gait and a whole set of reflexes, trigger unaware. If AIDS made me passive, ACT UP made me blunt. If AIDS fostered urgency, ACT UP spelled that out. If AIDS made me insecure, ACT UP had me chant it. And if AIDS blanketed my universe, ACT UP plugged that blanket in. The time was vital, it was charged, it was electric. Then and now, there was very little room left for speculation, artistic or otherwise. The searing, mutating nature of society's early and ongoing reaction to AIDS, combined with the radical tactics employed by ACT UP, Grand Fury, and other grassroots organizations to take control of the disease, fostered a disposition within me, artistic and otherwise, that learned, believed, assumed, and then breathed a truth that being literal, writing in big block letters, storming cathedrals, rehearsing one's own imminent death, was the only way to communicate with government, university, heterosexuals, and the world at large, just to stay alive. Sure, there were clever people at the helm of all these organizations. After all, many of those dying and noticing a trend were well-educated, talented gay men. And in retrospect, many products of that era's beautifully flailing, powerfully designed rhetoric have been labeled magnificent art in the sweet, scholarly sanctified hereafter. But back then, when posters, street actions, and videos were being made, subtle, speculative, beautifully crafted art was the farthest thing from mind. And even though the process of that bewildering experience was warmly cohesive and paradoxically life-affirming, The ultimate product had to be insistently in your face, bash you over the head, and make you squirm didactic in order to be effective. So, for fledgling artist, human being me, there was no room for speculation. Speculation presumed a future. Speculation suggested a languid time of easy, angsty process, room for trial and error, standing back, gaining distance, setting something aside, and perhaps maybe one day down the road turning to it again. Distance, I had none of that, and I still carry with me an urgent list of things to do. I'm not saying anything novel here. It's just that I'm articulating a fully understood fact in artistic terms, in my artistic terms, for the very first time. I own my experience, or vice versa, but I hate talking about myself. Many artists who produced work in the 1980s, many queer artists, that is, who sprang from the bouncy plank of Stonewall, soaring high into the sky and then plunging deep and hard into a bottomless well of pandemic pandemonium, use their face, their truth, their heritage, their love, their death, their messy, joyous sex as a series of emphatically proud dots to connect an urgent, self-declarative message writ large. I resisted that. Neither my experience nor my artistic practice is about me, although both have been fed by the length and breadth of my shared days on this earth. For me, today is still about us, because after all, 2/3 of us might be dead in 5 years. Before I began my MFA, I looked gently upon my peers, and I saw within me the personification of a kind of collateral damage, for some, not all, of those swift-moving years. I see myself first as a boyish bystander to a peculiar malady, then victim to it, and then once it touched normal others, I'm the emphatic cause of it. I see myself quarantined to an island along with scores of other blotchy lepers. I see and still see a glass of water that my grandmother wouldn't share because lips equal infection just as surely as silence equals death. And with that visual in mind, a question that has lasted my entire life resurrects itself and asks, what bit of me can be touched without worry? I see myself policing skin, throat, and pulse day to day, and I still panic at the symptoms of a cold. Then in time, I see myself wearing indestructible Doc Martens and a dark blue donkey jacket with red tartan lining and taking to the streets. Heads turn with one ill-informed fear flickering into another as my seemingly endless revolution roars round the world. I see myself proud, and then I see myself dead, dead in one sunken skull after another, all of them ultimately mine. Then I see myself well, but frighteningly deformed with a hard belly, a humped neck, and a face drained of fat. And then with this grateful crumb of life come waves of pity and revulsion and valiant attempts to stay human in the eyes of humankind. I see myself pumped with steroids, joining gyms and lifting weights until stringy, desperate muscle lace my fragile bone. Then comes rejection of all manner and kind, nuanced rejection, brutal rejection, invisible rejection, and my own convoluted rejection of me. This then followed by a rainbow of different drugs, providing an out-of-body pleasure, a far, far, far away from body pleasure, where permission is finally, drunkenly given to rip off the latex and fuck things up for the remainder of days. Then, more years down the line, I see and feel middle-aged aches and middle-aged pains. New illnesses arise, yet I'm still wearing skimpy tops and Daisy Dukes over my thin orange skin. I see my doctor every 6 months. I swallow indifference, loneliness, addiction, and a new gay agenda that makes no sense at all. Then, finally, after all of that and so much more, I see for the first time that my identity is exhausted and that pride has had its ride. And with a huge shrug of resignation, a shrug that sloughs off so much self in the process, I understand that self-empowerment, that once tremendous ally, is just another word with nothing left to do. That was AIDS for me as it played itself out in America and upon any artistic pretensions that I might have had. Mine, just one field in those good bygone culture wars. That for me was liberation. ACT UP was a movement that moved heaven and earth, touching everyone, even eventually a president. And in that furious march forward, as my generation bulldozed through the bureaucracy of institutions large and small, each with its own fiercely policed, often illogical labyrinth of procedure, those of us with fully invested hearts, indelibly impacted minds, and inevitably infected blood became bootstrapped to a manner of speaking, a way of seeing, a kind of wide-eyed, vigilant forecasting that utterly believed the day after tomorrow would be our last, and that capital letters and blinking red arrows were all we had to make the madness stop. The 1980s were a major fork on a mighty road, a frightening intersection where skin touched skin with shock and awe, and personal space shrank to an agonizing nothing, each of us just a breath away from death. It was a spot in time where my youth rallied until threads of sturdy pavement ribboned off and we all walked away. 1991, 1994, 1998, 2002, 2006. I began my MFA in 2007 with thousands of similarly Xerox days behind me, still happily mired in that indefatigable truth.